We just faced every single tech issue that ever existed known to mankind. Lauren's already done her introduction like 8 times. So I'm just gonna do like a quick like need to know because I'm pretty sure people will be like, yeah, obviously we know Lauren Hom. She's great. She's a lettering artist. You probably like me got her book at TJ Maxx and like fangirled out when you were a little wee one. And then she's great. You probably took her courses, you've heard her speak, you've listened to her podcast, and now she's a chef.
It's been everything. We had a whole conversation with Lauren about this like Facebook marketplace scam that
Wow.
she narrowly avoided earlier. And that's all lost to the ether now. So all I was trying to say is we could just really hear the defeat in your voice, Ilana, coming through in that intro. I'm so sorry that we're starting off with this energy. We had much better energy, so we're going to bring it back. We're going to, I think we're in Zoom now. Thanks, Zoom, for saving the day.
For always being there when we need you.
We're really hoping the internet's going to hold out and not explode. But we are seriously so excited to talk with you, Lauren. And we're going to let's just dive into it now that we've kind of stolen your intro from you. Like Ilana mentioned, she just graduated from culinary school. Let's hear a little bit about it, Lauren. How was it?
It was great. It was about a year-long program. I moved to New York temporarily. I'm back in Detroit now, kind of figuring out my life. And yeah, I've always loved to cook in addition to letter. And so I figured this is early 2021, I think. I was like, you know what? I've been so lucky to have been able to turn one of my passions, design, into a career, like, why not go for the other one? And I didn't even necessarily go into culinary school thinking I was going to professionalize it or make money with it, because I have so many friends who have worked in the food service industry who say it is rough. So I also went in knowing that. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do with it professionally, but I figured worst case scenario, I'm like a great cook, like professionally trained for the rest of my life. Best case scenario, it turns into some money, but I'm sure because this is kind of how I naturally operate, it'll work its way in there in one way or another, even if it's not my main source of income.
Okay.
Well, I so admire your bravery and your just like chutzpah that it takes to make those decisions to like go after something, even though you don't necessarily know where it will lead. But you've always been great at following your passions and then making it into something that eventually is bringing you joy for one, but then also bringing you financial support on the other.
Yeah.
Well,
Your brain is
you.
just really good at tying those things together. I think that's really your strength.
So
Thank you. That means so much.
I have a question on that pivot because I think we're going to talk a lot about pivoting and like introducing a new product or introducing a new service or whatever. But when you went to culinary school, was there a piece of you that was like afraid to take a pause from this? I hate the word empire, but like you've built a community of lettering artists who have like grown with you and learned alongside you or like really looked up to you. And did you ever have this like, oh my God, am I leaving it all behind? Or did you feel confident, like it'll be there when I come back? You know what I mean? I think a lot of people are really scared to pivot because of that feeling of starting over.
Absolutely. I felt everything you just said. I think the optimistic part of me was like, yeah, they'll be there. Like people will support me. But there was the kind of nagging voice in the back of my head, whether you want to call it fear or I don't know, of like, well, I have a good thing going. Why would I change course? But like Katie mentioned, it is one of my strengths to keep myself aligned with joy and playfulness and like what's interesting to me. And for me, I had to explain this to my parents. Being interested in something is the prerequisite for me to like do a good job at it. And because I had been running my lettering business for 12 years, gosh, I just needed to shake things up. So like, I think long term, I knew this was what I needed, but short term, it absolutely felt scary because there's like the practical voice in the back of your head being like, well, it's like, I always think of like my dad in the back of my head being like, don't blow it up. And it's not blowing it up. I consider it an expansion more than a pivot. That's what I've been telling myself, at least. But yeah, it definitely wasn't as mentally easy as I had hoped it would be, because I feel like I have one foot in one world and like the lettering design world, and then another foot in cooking, especially last year. But now that I'm back in my design studio, I'm trying to figure out what I might want to do with it. But like I said, it's tough because I think it's made me appreciative of getting to sit for most of my job, because all my friends who went into restaurants after culinary school, you're on your feet 12 hours a day in a hot kitchen, like you smell like onions. And I love cooking, but I'm trying to figure out a way that I can keep cooking pleasurable for myself, because as you both know, when you monetize a skill or a hobby or something you're interested in, it just changes your relationship to it. It doesn't ruin it. It doesn't make it better or worse. It just changes.
These are such relatable things. And it was interesting because you started really dipping into the the food lettering side of things before you went to culinary school. And so obviously that overlap was really interesting for us to see. But do you think you're going to keep moving things in that direction now that you have even more culinary skills in your back pocket?
I've done a couple food lettering things since graduating culinary school, and I definitely think my food styling has gotten better.
What ways do you like incorporating your two passions? And is it easy to find? I feel like some people are like, well, I like dogs and I like lettering. And it's like, well, duh, put those two together and do dog lettering. Like make stuff for dog beds, make stuff for dog lovers. It appears that you have a really easy time tying those two things together. And then when the tide turns and you focus on things that are even when you did that, I think it was like a baguette, but it was the ceramics. Like that felt so
yeah, I'm looking
Lauren.
at it right now.
Yeah, that felt so Lauren, but it had nothing to do with lettering. So is there a secret sauce? I mean, how have you navigated that? My dog is squeaking. Yeah, what's the actual sauce? What are the ingredients?
So like Katie mentioned, I was dabbling in more crafts, food, ceramics, leading up to leaving for culinary school. I honestly think as a way to start acclimating myself and my audience to not just seeing lettering from me. And I think oftentimes the scary thing with trying a new thing or pivoting, especially when you're publishing the content online, is that you're going to confuse your audience, or you get so in a niche that you can't imagine doing anything else. But instead, it's not so. Whenever I'm fearful, I think I get stuck in more binary thinking, good, bad, right, wrong. But I think that people are looking for new and fresh and exciting things from the artists that they follow. So that's what I was telling myself the whole time, where my typical, I guess, sauce or framework for incorporating my interests into my work, but without jarring my audience of I start posting makeup beauty content all of a sudden, which who knows, maybe I would in the future. But I have this framework that I call niche for now, where I found my niche with lettering kind of by happenstance, made a Tumblr blog, right? 2011, very 2011. And I didn't think of lettering as being my thing, but it became my thing because the internet responded. And very slowly over the last 12 years, anytime I start feeling stagnant or bored or am I going to be a one-trick pony? I start to plant seeds towards something else. So when it was just digital, dimensional, colorful lettering, I then started doing, it's one step away. So I added chalkboard lettering. So it wasn't I went from lettering to ceramics. I'm taking baby steps to kind of get to no specified goal, actually, but incorporating just one new either skill, medium, interest at a time is the way that I've been able to incorporate all of my interests and passions in a way that isn't, I guess, is respectful of my audience's time and energy and how easy it is to comprehend me. Because we were talking about, when you monetize something, you're now in relationship with a customer and an audience. I just finished reading this book called The Art of Gathering, and it's been fresh in my mind. One of the ways I host or care for my audience is by making sure that they can still follow along pretty easily. So that's kind of how I've done it, where to get to ceramic baguette, right, from Daily Dishonesty, picking up my book in TJ Maxx, that's a pretty big jump. But the little steps in between, from chalk lettering, my Will Letter for Lunch project, where I'd letter chalkboard signs for local restaurants, and then they'd pay me in whatever I lettered on the chalkboard. Then I moved into murals, and then I moved into food lettering, some food art. I did my flower crown series, making flower crowns out of bread. And so getting to the ceramic baguette, which everyone should check out, it's my pride and joy, didn't seem like that big of a jump. And because I've made my business and my creative practice all about what I'm passionate about, I always tell people it's good to incorporate those things into your work, because you've done thousands of hours of self-study, unpaid self-study in these arenas, in these areas of interest. And the ceramic baguette appeared in my mind after taking ceramics class for 2 years, because it's just what I'm thinking about. Because I cook and because I host dinner parties and like to entertain, my brain is already it's like my brain was primed once I got into ceramics class to be like, I know how to serve food and like I know serving dishes, I know how to bake bread. And so the ideas just kind of appeared.
Right.
And I think that you're
Yeah.
setting yourself up for, if you pursue your passions, you're just setting yourself up to have good ideas, interesting ideas, new ideas, because they will naturally marinate together.
I love the use of marinate.
Yes.
I think
So-
it's such practical advice too. Sorry, Ilana, I'll let you jump in.
You're good.
It's such good practical advice around niching and the fear that's around that, because we hear this all the time. There's just this kind of misconception or idea that we're supposed to niche and stay there in this one little tiny box for the rest of our careers and just own that space. And that's how you make a living and you remind people what you're doing. But we've learned more and more too that, I mean, our creative brains don't work that way. First of all, we're going to get the itch. We're going to feel uncomfortable. We're going to feel claustrophobic. And so you said niche for now. Our phrase is kind of niching out instead of niching down. So in that way, we're sort of talking about like finding the threads of who you are and expanding them over everything that you do. And instead of just like getting smaller and trying to fit yourself into this one little arena, that may be great for now, but you're going to get really frustrated with later. So yeah, I really appreciate this. And I also was taking a songwriting course from one of my favorite songwriters, and she was like, talking about style and niche and all that. And she was like, I feel like my niche is just being really experimental, and people just expect from me, I'm going to throw something out there that's like totally out of left field. And that has become her brand, is just like surprising people and delighting them and just being in all sorts of different genres and melding them together. So I really got inspired when she said that, and thought about how I could apply that to design and how we could kind of reframe our thinking in that way.
Yeah, it's fun that you're learning, like you get those nuggets of information from something non-design related, because every creative practice outside of like sitting on my computer or iPad designing has been so beneficial. Like working, I love working with my hands. And I think that that's something that, unless I'm drawing on paper or painting a mural, oftentimes there's kind of like a slog period of if I've been on my computer for too long where I get like a little itchy. So cooking, like ceramics, just doing something like gardening, I love just working with my hands. And so because I know that about myself, it's up to me to like make sure that that's integrated into my weekly routine, whether that's through a hobby or through the work that I do. For me, monetizing my passions works because we all have to work. Most of us have to work in order to survive. It allows me to spend more of my day doing the activities that I like to do, even if sometimes it can get stressful if your livelihood depends on it. But one thing I've been saying in my presentations lately is keeping yourself interested and engaged in the work is part of the job description that I didn't know going into being a freelancer. I think most people start with one niche. Like lettering was my thing because I put it out there because I was interested in it, and then the internet responded and I was like, I guess this is my thing. I like doing it. Seems like people like it. And what your songwriting teacher said about experimenting, that is the best mindset to have as a freelancer and an artist. Is everything's an experiment. Your career is basically a laboratory or a kitchen, whatever you want to call it, where you could take all the online courses, you could get all the mentorship, read all the books about strategy and what worked for different people, but you actually have to try it out in your own life in small ways or big ways, whatever you want to do, to see if it is going to work. And you never know until you put it out there, because if you're going to monetize it, you need to be in dialogue with an audience. It needs to be an audience for it, at least.
All of that, that's the whole episode. I think we're good. You're saying it so like you're condensing this really. Yeah, thank you. This topic is really hard for people, and you can either go like one of two ways. You can go to the point where you're like, I've monetized all my hobbies and now they're not fun anymore and now they're not hobbies. Or you can go in the other direction where you like never want to take something you enjoy and figure out how to turn it into a business, or like the business side of things really feels like it's going to suck your soul out. And so to hear you so succinctly talk about that middle situation where you're like actually monetizing it and still enjoying it and making room for play is really beautiful. But I do think there's a piece of this that ties into social media, because people really, I think, started following your work before influencing was even a thing. And so I don't know if you would like associate yourself with the term influencer, because the job title now is like sharing Amazon links and making money off of affiliate links. And that's not how I see you. I see you as like people following your work because they love your work. I'm curious how you think people can kind of grow the same way and share and create those common threads that like won't be such a huge jump for me, like doing a jewelry business to doing like, I don't know, cooking or whatever. How can people make that jump if they aren't showing up and telling that story and all the little bits and pieces of it along the way? I feel like that's a harder connect for people. Whereas like we've been following you for years, we know little bits and pieces of what you're doing all the time, even though we don't really, I mean, we just know these tiny little bits and pieces. So do you feel like social media just is a huge piece of this, or do you feel like yeah, what are your thoughts?
Yeah. Okay. Might break this into pieces. Because we don't have like a better term for it, like, yeah, I'd say I'm an Instagram influencer. We're all influencers technically, like everyone can influence in whatever big or small room you might be in. But yeah, as a business model, it's not my bread and butter because it doesn't excite me. Like my podcast co-host and I always joke about this because we're very similar in a lot of ways, but we're very different. She loves stuff. She considers herself a gear gal. Like if she gets into a new hobby or a new interest, she needs all the gear. She loves the gear. Whereas I could care less about the gear. The reason I got into lettering in college was it was interesting to me in my like type 1 class. And I was like, I love that I can just have a piece of paper and pencil and like now I can do my new hobby. I like pretty minimal things that require minimal tools because I don't buy a lot of stuff myself. I'm kind of like a use what you have, kind of hack it together. I don't think that the traditional influencer model would work for me because it doesn't excite me to share products with people. But what excites me is teaching. I also love making stuff. I think it's a prerequisite for me for a job to be making things and sending them out into the world, which is why when I first graduated from college, I got a degree in advertising and marketing. I went to go work at an ad agency, and what frustrated me to no end was that we'd work for months on these campaigns and pitch these ideas and nothing would ever get shipped. Ideas would get killed. And I felt like I was getting my paycheck every 2 weeks, but I didn't get the satisfaction of like seeing something to completion, which is why I started doing these side projects and passion projects, was to have some small area of my creative life carved out that I had full autonomy over. And like I was the creative director and the client. And I loved that feeling, which is why freelancing is a good fit for me. I think that with social media, in order to like get people to have that jump not be so jarring if you have lots of interests, you have to tell people what you're interested in. The same way to market your creative business, you have to tell people what you offer and remind them again and again. And that doesn't have to be in like a markety way. Something I teach in my classes is what if instead of like, it's not selling, you're just telling them about something. Just reframing it that way makes it feel a little less icky for anyone who has any icky feelings around sales. Because I don't think that sales are a bad thing. Like I think all of us who run businesses want sales, but we can't be scared of trying to make them then. And so you're just telling people about yourself, about what you do. And I think that I only share certain aspects of my life. It's usually related to my creative interests, but because I'm so passionate about all my creative interests, it's easy to share. So I would recommend to anyone listening to share the stuff that feels easy for you to share first. And once you get into like a groove, it becomes easier to share more. I think that there are like a couple topics that all of us could probably pick out in our lives that we could talk. You could probably give an hour-long presentation on right now because you've done those thousands of hours of Reddit research and Googling and watching YouTube videos that other people haven't done. So we're all just sharing the things that like we find interesting. And I think that we have to show people what we're interested in order for them to connect with us too, because the way I've built, like this wasn't intentional, by the way, I didn't go in with like a 10-point business plan. The way I've built my business and my audience has just been by using my creative skills to create projects around areas of interest in my life. And so people know I like food, whether they follow me today or 10 years ago, because I'm always talking about it, because I, in my day-to-day life, don't shut up about it. Like my shirt even has food on it.
Yeah, she's living and breathing it, people.
Yeah. It's amazing to see how intentional it is. I mean, that seems obvious, but you see so many people who make these pivots and you're like, oh, that's so interesting. Like, I didn't see that coming. Or they like disappear and they burn out. And then they're like, oh, I guess it's time for a pivot. But when you plant these little seeds and don't necessarily have an expectation of where they're going to go, like you said at the beginning, you're not exactly sure how your new culinary degree is going to fit into your everyday life. Like it's great either way, but you're not exactly sure what that 5-year plan or 10-year plan looks like. But you have that seedling now. You have that in your tool belt, and you can continue planting and watering that seed and seeing where it goes. And it won't ever feel out of left field because we've been following this whole time. But you see people burn out and then disappear and come back like in a completely different direction because they didn't really plant those seeds because they were like, I guess it's like sort of this toxic idea of like niching down. Like Katie said, actually, if you niche out and spread the same passion and talent across multiple things, then you sort of build a better foundation for yourself.
But I
Yeah,
think too,
totally.
it's important to sometimes just take those full detoxes from social
Oh,
media. So
yes.
I and Ilana knows that, especially like she's
Yes.
fully done it. And I haven't posted something on my personal in so long, other than stories. I've just been using stories, and I've just been taking a full break for a long
Great.
time from posting.
You know what you need.
Yeah. And I think too, we take breaks and then we come back, and it's hard to get started again, or you're scared to come back at all because it's just been too long. But I just want to mention too, I think you can always come back and pivot and change and just tell the story from where you are now. So if you
Yes.
didn't lay the seeds along the way, I mean, that's a great strategy if you're able to stick with it and plan ahead. But if you come back, I think, yeah, like what you're saying, Lauren, is it's all about just telling your story and talking about who you are from a place of authenticity, and instead of like feeling like it's coming from a weird markety place. So yeah, just connect the dots by telling people. That's all it takes.
Right. I don't
Yeah.
think we need to like set up. It's not that we have to do it over slowly. We have to do it just with a little bit of grace, and if you can add some intention there. But yeah, people leave the internet and come back and they're a completely changed person all the time. And I guess part of it is like it's not that deep. Like if someone
Yeah,
wasn't
totally.
I have unfollowed people and then refollowed them later when I'm
Mhm.
like in a headspace where I'm available to show up, or like, oh, I really like what they're doing now, or whatever. People change, and like it's not that deep if you do come on and want to introduce something. Sometimes we forget we have to talk about it a lot, and that pressure can feel like humongous mountain sitting on your brain because you like feel repetitive and then you feel salesy. But I liked your approach about not making it feel icky, basically.
Yeah, I think for me, I tend to focus on the areas that feel easy because there's so much wrapped up in social media of like, why am I sharing? Is this performative? What should I share? And like, especially as artists, it's like, you got to make the art to share in the first place. So I think it's definitely a whole, like, it's a lot. But even just snippets of your personal life. I don't know. Have you had Scott Biersack on this podcast yet?
No, we haven't had him, but we know him.
Cool. So Scott, you bring fire. When I first met Scott, I didn't know his name, but I was like, are you bring fire? It's funny how like when we don't go by our names on the internet.
The
Yeah.
handle.
Yeah, but I think this is the first story that's coming to mind. But I went to a concert at this venue here in Detroit with my employee, Crystal, and we were in this, it's kind of decorated in like a retro-y, like 80s kind of vibe. And they had a whole stack of like old TVs with like 8-bit kind of graphics on them. And Crystal was like, oh, this reminds me of Scott, because he does a lot of like, he loves video games and refurbishes Game Boys and stuff. And we only know that, even though he's like such a talented lettering artist, he's also just sharing the things that he's jazzed about, refurbishing a Game Boy, an old Game Boy. And when Crystal said that to me, I was like, oh yeah, that's a good reminder that like part of marketing that doesn't feel like marketing is just sharing your interests and sharing what you're excited to share. The same way if a friend came over and was like, what's been going on? The thing you like can't wait to tell them that you've been working on or tinkering or something you learned. I think that is marketing too, just sharing like, hey, I thrifted this cool shirt, or hey, like I restored this Game Boy, or I learned how to make my own hand lotion, whatever it might be. Or if you're traveling, I think that stuff that we don't necessarily see as marketing can be just as powerful, especially if you have some areas of interest that you find yourself going to again and again. It can implant you and your design work and like who you are in people's minds.
Yeah, you're definitely getting my brain going, because I think about what I share in stories, which is really just my actual life lately.
Yeah.
because I have no other place that I want to put it these days. So they just go in stories, and it's travel, it's interior design. Like I love doing DIY projects in my home, and I share about that. And it's always so funny that it's like a design account, but then the stuff that gets the most responses and stories are it's like an argument you had with your husband about how to pronounce a word or something, and you get more replies than you've ever gotten before. And you're like, wait, people are interested in more stuff about me, or like they're interested in other areas of life outside of just design, even though this is a design account.
100%. And I think that comes from like the era of internet that we all joined, Instagram, right? And started our businesses, where this really got in my mind. It like really got in my head a lot and was tough to work through leading up to culinary school. But I think the business advice I was absorbing like in like the 20s, 15 to 17 era, a lot of it was, it's still good advice, but it was like, know your ideal customer, like serve your audience, provide value, these kind of like arbitrary, but generally good things to think about. And I think that what you were saying too about like niching out versus in, like when you go too into your business and like you have too much of like a laser focus, it can feel like that's all you're allowed to do, or that's all that your audience wants from you when you start over identifying with your niche. And for me, I got in my head about, like you were saying about your design account, like people are here for lettering and to learn creative business tips. And that's all I am, and that's all I can do. And it's not what you actually want to do, then you're not going to share, or you're going to become resentful of having to share online. So I think that I had to kind of break out of that and go, no, like what you were saying, people think that random shower thoughts that you have, or things from your like everyday human regular life, people do like to get a peek behind the curtain. Not everything has to be related to your business. That's kind of the framework I've noticed working the best for myself and other creative people in my life. I know plenty of people who are fine just sharing business stuff, and like Instagram is just Instagram, it's just their work, it's just their business. But for us, it's a little complicated for artists because it's your work, but it's also you are so much of your work that it's easy to get the two conflated sometimes.
Right. I just saw somebody that I follow on Instagram. They did like a roundup of stuff I've been interested in this month. I just like loved scrolling through it. At the end, I responded and I was like, this was absolutely delightful, because it was like the couch that they're trying to decide on, and like this specific recipe that they've been obsessed with this month, and this funny Google search that they accidentally typed in and it really made them laugh. It was just like a roundup of their experience outside of art for the month. And I thought that was a really fun way to present it. It enthralled me, at least as the viewer.
It's also funny because we act as if, I mean, partially this is true, but we curate our feed for the people who we don't actually personally know. Whereas if my account was just for the people who personally know me, then the things I would post would be really different. And those things are the things that usually get the most comments. I'm telling you, I've become a salad queen. I've always been a salad queen, but like whenever I share a salad, which like has nothing to do with design, people are like, wait, what's in that? Tell me more. And I'm like, this is the thing I would send to like my best friends. They're curious. They want to know. And I'm like, here's what I had for lunch. There's this creator, Spaghetti and Meatballs. She is a greeting card designer, and her dad is like it's amazing. The content with her dad is always the best. And then she's single. And so she's always doing these, like, she's sharing to her stories or like creating content about how the trends she's seeing. She's like, I didn't get the memo about it being spring, so all men must wear vests now if they work in finance. And like, then she'll like find a hot security guard and be like, guys, look at him, and like really zoom. Like, you're here for the ride. And it has nothing to do with the work she creates, but it makes me want to buy from her more because I'm like, I need to meet your dad in real life. He's perfect. He's everyone's dad. He's Instagram's dad. And it's just like those personal connections, they do make, it's not just the artwork. Like there's so much more behind it that makes a person someone we want to like support and follow and be a part of their 100%. Community.
I've definitely benefited from, again, it's harder for me to do the bigger my audience gets, because it maybe the longer I've been in it too, but the way that I got catapulted into lettering to begin with was I made that Daily Dishonesty Tumblr blog where I was 21 at the time, and I was just lettering like the stupid little white lies that me and my other 21-year-old girlfriends would tell ourselves, like, I'm not drinking tonight, or like, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Things that like, as a 33-year-old now, I look back on and I'm just like, I would never say that publicly on the internet now. It feels very like, I don't even know. It's just a different time in my life. I don't relate to that anymore. But at the time, because I was making that for me and my friends, it ended up attracting an audience because it was honest. And I don't know if it was putting like my best self forward, but it was certainly honest. And I think that it's stuff like that, like salads, right? Or just things that you are interested in, snippets from your everyday life that humanize you, because behind screens we're just these little like avatars. And I think it is a really powerful marketing tool, like a byproduct of sharing just little bits of yourself and your life, things that you find funny. There are people who find that funny too. Not everyone will, but the more you are yourself, like the earlier and the more you are yourself, the more it acts like a filtration system for like, who are you for? Who are you not for? Like, I actually make it a point, my dad disagrees with me on this, but I make it a point to curse in my like copywriting and my work, not all the time, but just sprinkling a little garnish here and there, because that's actually how I talk in real life. And if somebody is offended that I used a curse word in a reel or like a caption, they can show themselves out because they probably won't like some of the other stuff down the road. And I think that people have agency to tap out whenever, like you were saying, Ilana, you have followed people, unfollowed people. There's actually one of my favorite rings that I wear. I'm not wearing it right now because I don't know where my jewelry is. But this jewelry designer, Laurel Hill, I believe, I bought a ring from her. And then eventually she shut down the business and pivoted to doing something else. I can't remember what it was, but it was like human design, maybe some kind of human design reading. And I remember unfollowing her because it wasn't something I was interested in anymore, but it didn't mean like I didn't like her anymore. And maybe if I get interested in human design, I'll refollow her. I think the internet's a big place and we're all just kind of floating around and we can always tap out and tap back in. I think there is a social faux pas to unfollowing people that you know in real life that I still feel. But for the most part, like anyone who wouldn't understand that, probably not that close to begin with. Like I think there's a lot of stuff we do because we think other people are going to react a certain way. Like I need to behave this way on the internet, but the internet's like the wild, wild west. Even the niche things that you find interesting or funny or that are going on in your life, there are so many other people out there who are probably going through the same thing.
Totally. I think this conversation about the seedlings that we're planting and the
Mhm.
experimentation has been super helpful. I would like to then kind of take it to the
Yeah.
next step of like, how do we decide what we want to foster and water more and give more attention to? When we're creative, we just have so many ideas. And how do we decide which ones should be taken to the next level?
The next level in the sense of skill level or like
The next
integrating
level
it into your business?
in the sense of I'm going to create a passion project around this, or I'm going to monetize this, or whatever that next step is. Like, how do we know it's going to go from like a hobby or something we like dipped our toe into devoting more time and attention to?
Yeah, for me, it typically has to do with dabbling in something like lettering, ceramics, whatever it may be, food, and doing it for long enough that you get a sense of something I want to sustain. Because some things like I picked up supplies to do embroidery one time and I was so excited about it because I had so many things saved on Pinterest for embroidering my denim jackets. And I sat down to do it and I was like, this sucks. I hate the
Girls, same.
I
This is
hated
so
the actual
relatable.
motion and like
Yeah.
I'm just like sitting there with this little circle and it was just it didn't do
We've
anything
all
for
had
me.
those like hobbies that we go and we pick up everything from Michael's and we like hoard it. Like, this is going to be my new identity. And then you try it once and you're like, nah.
Oh my gosh, I've been joking with my friend Rachel that I do podcast with that there needs to be some like I think it might be too niche because it's like it would need to be localized, but I wish there was a Facebook Marketplace-esque kind of thing specifically for I bought all the supplies, I don't like it. Who wants like the starter pack? I have all the things.
Abandonedcrafts.com.
Yeah.
Wait, my neighborhood sort of has something like this.
Tell
It's
me.
not niche for crafts, but my neighborhood has like a buy sell trade. And I'm telling you, one time someone was like, I have this stapler. Does anyone need it? I'm like, I appreciate your efforts to save the universe by not just throwing that in the garbage, but it's a stapler.
Yeah.
Like nobody cares. And there is so much on there. And I have one friend who like literally every time I see a post, because I'm like going into like see if there's I don't know, something cool that I want. She's on every post. I don't know if she's flipping these things, but they'll be like, notebook, I used the first page, brand new makeup, wrong color, I can't return it. And it's like all day, every day. Oh my gosh, it's so intense. But it's actually kind of lovely that people are like, just pick it up, it's on my doorstep.
Yeah, like you try
Take
it out.
Take it.
So step one, make sure it's something you want to stick with and
I
not
think if you,
something that's going
yeah,
to end up on abandonedcrafts.com.
it's like,
Trademark.
I've been thinking a lot about this only because this is what's going on in my actual life. But the reason I'm in this, like back in the studio in Detroit, kind of figuring things out is because I ended a 7-year relationship with my ex. And now I'm in this state of like dating again. And I've really been thinking a lot about the parallels between finding love and finding creative fulfillment. Because I think you really do have to like date a craft or a skill or something for a little bit to figure out like, do you want to commit? It's the same thing. And you only know, like, there's no amount of YouTube videos or courses that you could watch. You have to actually just get out there, get the supplies, and try the thing to see how it actually feels for you.
See if you get the ick.
Yeah, exactly. You might get the ick with crafts, a certain thing right away. Like, even though I'm a lettering artist, for whatever reason, I've never been attracted to designing my own font. I don't think I have maybe because I'm older and know myself well enough, like, I don't think I have the patience to do all of the kerning and tracking and like the nuances of type. Lettering is as far as I'll go. And in terms of the like speed and production, these are things you only find out through trial and error. I like quicker projects that like you start it and then you finish it, it's wrapped, you don't have to think about it again. And I think you do have to try out the thing, gauge your enthusiasm. I don't think I could prescribe like a timeline necessarily, but usually the next part too is once you start digging into a new skill or hobby, sharing that and getting some audience feedback is important. A lot of people start with just friends and family. Maybe you're texting it in the family group text, like, I learned how to do this, needlepoint, and then sharing it with people who don't know you. So like on social media, even if it's just like an Instagram story, just to start testing the waters to see what kind of response you might get from it. Again, everything's just an experiment. The reason I started with lettering is because I put it out there, not really thinking much about it. I knew I was interested in lettering. I wanted to practice it. So I used my daily dishonesty passion project as the vehicle to practice lettering. That was my whole thing. And I look back at that lettering and it wasn't very good, but I was having a lot of fun. And I think that's what garnered the audience for it. Passion projects can be a great way to do the aforementioned steps where you like it. So you're like, okay, let me create a series of 10 things, 10 pieces, 10 items under one theme and like post that online, like drip them out. And then you can gauge audience feedback. And then you can gauge like, do I like doing this? Passion projects are also a great way to figure out if you like producing something over and over and over again, because that's the part of the business of like monetizing a creative skill that maybe you love throwing pots on the wheel in ceramics, but do you like throwing 40 of them? Maybe, maybe not. And then you also get to figure out the parts that you like and you don't like. So for me, I am so allergic to any admin tasks, which is why as soon as I knew I wanted to be a full-time freelancer, I was like, I need a business manager or an agent or something because I could not be bothered to send invoices. When I first started dabbling in doing freelance lettering work, I felt myself just getting so annoyed at having to like send contracts and invoices. So you also learn about your process and if you were going to monetize this full-time or even part-time, what things you might need to implement in order to make it work for you, because everyone's different. So I think for me, like I'll use ceramics as an example. I don't think I will ever monetize ceramics because now that I've been doing it for a couple years, mostly as a hobby, like I don't do any ceramics passion projects. I do like one-off things and share them when I can, but the process takes me so long and I can't imagine how it's going to be profitable for me other than like licensing a design. If anyone's listening who wants to license this baguette design and help me produce it, I'm all ears, but there's no way I'm going to build those baguettes one by one. Like I need to charge like $5,000 each. And that's just not a reasonable price point for the average person. And then what? Is my niche now like selling $5,000 baguette dishes to billionaires. That doesn't sound fun. So I think figuring out, like, getting to know the process to know if you even want to monetize it. It takes some commitment to even start to think about monetizing it first. Like, I had someone in a Q&A a couple weeks ago ask me about, I think it was the same question, figuring out what to monetize and like leaving a full-time job to figure out like what to monetize. I told her that, like, if it's lettering, for example, you have a full-time job, but you want to do lettering as a freelancer someday, start taking on, like, moonlight as a freelance lettering artist, take on like a little bit of freelance work so you can actually go through the process and figure out, do I like monetizing this? You don't even have to charge a lot of money for it at first. Like, you could do it for friends and family. I think that's how a lot of us start out, putting your work out there, letting people know that you're available for it. You're just dating it. You're trying it on. If you don't like it, you still have your full-time job. You didn't lose anything. So I think that for me, that's how it worked, where I did have a full-time job, but I was doing lettering on the side, and it happened to be this like life raft that I didn't know I was going to need from my full-time job. And that's kind of how I've operated my whole career, where yes, it can seem a little bit intense to be like, okay, you have your work that pays the bills, but you always have other stuff on the back burner. But that's how most creative brains work. Like, you do have a lot of interests. And I know we've been using the planting seeds and nurturing them, but what I've been using lately has been a 4-burner stovetop, like when you're cooking. Obviously, food's coming into like so many food analogies, but you have 4 burners. And those are like my 4 burners I can work with. Maybe I only want to put 2 pots on the burner, but there's a max of 4 going on at once, just so it's not too overwhelming, because sometimes it can feel like you're arbitrarily planting all these seeds and you're not planting them very deep and you're not watering them very often. But the stovetop, maybe because I've been cooking more, this is the new analogy I've been using. A stovetop is right in front of you. You're actively tending to it. If anyone's listening who cooks, like, some dishes require like simmering on low heat for a long time. That might be the small burner in the back. I consider the front burner, the big front burner, which is like the workhorse burner for all of us. We're cooking on a day-to-day basis. That is what's paying the bills. And that's the one that's kind of like in the front, highest heat. We all have to make money to survive. But then your other pots, like, it's up to you what you want to do with those. And you're just kind of like cooking and stirring all at once.
What a cool analogy. I love how many culinary references there have been and how many food puns there have been.
When it's something you're interested in and you've studied, whether self-study or through like an institution, again, it just planted in your brain to think in that language and to speak that way. And I have always been a big fan of doing this, because I think whether it's in like, especially because I teach, you want to speak to people in a language that they can understand. And most likely, like, I've heard comedians joke that like they look out in the audience and they just see a bunch of people who look like them showing up to their events, because that totally makes sense to me. Like, I bet there are so many Asian women in their 30s with like a piercing or a tattoo who follow me. Like, no duh. We want to find people that we can see a little bit of ourselves in. Obviously, not everyone we follow has to fall into that category, but what you said, Ilana, like some kind of like inroad or connection point that humanizes you and that makes someone interested in you. I got tagged in a really sweet story the other day from someone who found my podcast. I made this Japanese fruit sandwich. It's whipped cream and fruit inside like white bread.
I remember.
Okay, thank you.
I want to eat it.
It's like a Instagram reel that I made. You can probably find it on my profile if you're listening. When I cut it open, I had used alphabet cookie cutters, so the fruit inside said "fuck you." So it was like, that's like the funny little silly reveal. And this person had mentioned in their Instagram story, like, I originally found Lauren through this cursing fruit sandwich. And as I delved deeper, like, I realized we had a lot more in common. And like, I love this podcast. And you have to give people lots of entry points into your world. And people don't know anything about you unless you tell them, either explicitly through your words or maybe a little bit more subtly through just the things you're integrating into your design work. I'm just thinking about all the people I followed in the lettering world for a decade plus. It's no surprise to me that people who land their dream projects, clients want to hire people. So like Lisa Congdon, for example, loves to like bike. She bikes a lot. I think she does like intense either mountain biking or gravel biking. And she's posting about biking on the weekends in her story and sometimes even to her main. And it's no surprise to me that eventually she landed like sponsorships and design projects from bike companies because she's talking about it. People want to join in on conversations that they're interested in. And so me talking about food, Lisa talking about biking, like some people talking about like the music that they're into or their personality type, just sharing things about yourself will give people little sticky connection points as a way to like get to know you or dive deeper into your work. It's almost like little personality lead magnets by just being yourself. And like, you don't have to put all of yourself online because that is so exhausting, but you know, the couple things that you find yourself gravitating towards in conversation with close friends over and over again are probably great starting points to start sharing because it feels easy.
One of the things you mentioned learning about yourself was that you really couldn't be bothered to send the invoice and do like the admin tasks. And I just wanted to highlight that because we work with a lot of students around like how to run an art business. And when we want to give them all the tools and tell them all the things, because running a business takes so much and there are so many moving parts that you have to consider. And we just see people's eyes glaze over and they're like, holy shit. They kind of stop in their tracks and they're like, okay, well, I can't manage all of this. So this isn't for me. So I just wanted to get your perspective on it because you continued in the realm of business, even though there was stuff that was holding you up and stuff that you didn't like. So can you just talk to us a little bit about how you got over those humps or how you got help in those areas so that other people might get inspired to do the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, getting an agent was, I didn't know that you could hire like a part-time like admin person or something. And I wasn't at that stage when I was getting ready to leave my full-time job. So I just looked at other artists that I admired. So like Jessica Hish and like Dana Tanamachi. And I combed through all of their websites and I noticed a common thread was like, oh, all of my favorite artists who I admire and like I see them doing their thing and it sparks something in me that like, I would like to do that thing too. They all have agents and maybe there's something to this agent thing. So it was really as simple as that. Like, this must be the way that you get help with your business. And it turned out to be a good fit for me. My 22-year-old naivete really worked in my favor because I had the audacity to just reach out to all their agents being like, hey, here's a little bit about me. You want to represent me? And I probably reached out to 30 or so agents and heard back from a couple. And that's how I found representation. Like, granted, it was likely because I had been nurturing that pot on the back burner of lettering while I had my full-time job. So I had some recognizable clients. If it helps anybody who has a full-time job who's thinking about going freelance, when I quit my job and when I got my agent, my biggest client and the biggest project I had worked on was a $6,000 lettering project for an ad campaign that was within the Dallas-Fort Worth airport. This is very specific. That was promoting that all of their food courts now offered like breakfast options.
Oh, great.
And that was the biggest project I had ever negotiated by myself. And I remember getting the inquiry and when they said yes immediately, I was like, shoot, I probably should have asked for more money. But again, learning experience.
That's a telltale sign.
There's no point in beating yourself up over something that's already happened. Like, you just learn from it. And I know plenty of people who don't mind doing the admin, doing the negotiation. Cool. I wish I was that way. But I think when it comes to running a business, ideally being able to focus on your like zone of genius, spending more time doing that. But there are still things like I have to pay taxes, I have to run payroll, like I still have to do admin-y things, but it's just kind of like running your life, right? You got to do laundry at some point, unless you're going to send it out, but it usually makes more sense to do it yourself.
And you have an employee now, correct?
I do, yes. She's sitting right next to me.
Hi. So what does she do? What's her role?
Yeah, so Crystal, I hired her in, 2019. So it's been a while. Her 5-year work anniversary is coming up. And she does a little bit of everything. I originally hired her to basically be my second set of hands to letter. And so she was doing a lot of lettering. We came up with a kind of cool process of I might do like the thumbnails and then she would render them out and like basically be my second set of hands so I could focus on launching courses and doing other things in the business. So I will say, me going to culinary school for the year, like Crystal held the fort down. So that's a big factor to anyone listening to this who's like, how did she do it? Like, I have help.
Way to go, Crystal.
Yeah. As my business has evolved and my interests have changed, she still does lettering for me too. But right now she's sitting next to me, like editing the audio for my podcast. Like, she really is like a jack of all trades. And she's actually one of my online class students. And I ended up hiring her because I moved to Detroit and needed someone to help out in Detroit. When you put yourself out there and you share bits about yourself, like what you were saying about your songwriting teacher, like sharing lots of interests, you tend to attract people in your audience and customers, students who vibe with the style of teaching or your framework for life, how you operate. So I don't think it was a huge shock to her that I was dabbling in other things. And she actually has a BFA in photography from SCAD. So as I started delving into online courses, she was able to like help me shoot the video and edit the video, and any influencer like content creation that we do, like she shoots that. So it's really just helpful to have a second set of hands in the studio.
Well, shout out to Crystal for
MVP.
being a real one. We've got to love the crystals in our life who keep
Yes.
everything together for us. And then I'm so sad that we have to be wrapping up and we have to let you go, I guess. But we have time for like maybe one question that we normally ask, like a rapid fire.
Sure.
I got it. Yeah. I want to know 2 like very random things that you're super into right now. They could be a product like your lobster flip-flops or like a new dress you got. I know that there are so many more things that make up who you are. There are things about you that you also don't share. So what are like 2 things maybe we haven't heard you talk about before that you're really into?
Yeah. So one thing I've been into for a couple years now that I don't share much about, I haven't really thought about why I don't share it much. Maybe because it's not pretty dorky. I'm going to just shift my camera over.
I'm
a little
Doubt
excited.
it. I doubt it.
I've been really into hydroponic gardening.
Mhm.
So I, as an apartment dweller, I don't have a space to garden really. Like my old apartment had like a balcony that I could garden on, which was really nice. But I love tending to things, whether it's like stirring like a pot, right? Like simmering something. I love taking care of things. It's like, I don't know what it is about my personality type, but I was like, how do I grow things inside? And so I went down this like rabbit hole on YouTube of hydroponic gardening and found this method where you can just basically grow plants in buckets of nutrients. There's no air pumps or anything. It's very low tech. I'm pretty sure my YouTube algorithm thinks I'm like a doomsday prepper living off the grid, like trying to prepare for the apocalypse. But that is one of my like nerdy hobbies. And this is where I think all my interests start to guide my life. I didn't have to get into this because I have houseplants that could have scratched the itch, but there's something about growing edible food that really does something for me. And because I love to cook, like that informed my decision to like dive into this because I was like, I want to grow herbs and like lettuce. And I'm even trying tomatoes this year for the first time. That's like that blue bin right there. So that's something I'm very into. And then, ooh, is there a thing or a product? Honestly, my other hobby currently has just been selling stuff on Facebook Marketplace, which is so funny to me because my dad is like a prolific eBay seller. My family has like weird entrepreneurial sprinkles throughout the family. Everyone has a full-time job. No one like made it their whole business. People have little things going on the side that I was like, oh, maybe that's where I get it from, of like, see, having an interest and then monetizing it a little bit. My dad really loves watches. It's like a very old man hobby, but this has been going on for like 15 years. And he will buy and sell watches on eBay. He'll like buy one on eBay, fix it up, take it to his jeweler friend to get polished, and then he'll flip it. And he's been doing that since I was in middle school. And it has allowed him to like constantly look at watches, which is what he loves doing, and like connect with other old dudes who love watches. And I think that's very much what I do with my interests is like,
whatever does it for you.
Yeah, what can I do to spend more time on this subject? And my dad has had a full-time job this whole time. It's just his kind of like side thing, but he pays his rent with it. It's not a salary by any means, but he's usually able to pay his rent with his watch hobby. There's something maybe being raised by like Asian parents who were like, you got to make money, or living in like a capitalist society. It's just like ingrained in my brain. But I get a little tickle from making money from things that are fun for me. It feels like I'm pulling one over society of like, wait, this is a job? Like, this is money? This is cool. Like, it feels good to me. So I've always gotten like a little kick out of that because my whole life, I feel like society has told me work needs to be serious and hard and like you put your head down and you just do the work. But I think for creative types and artists, we need some kind of joy or play infused in the work. It's like the carrot on the stick leading us to the work.
Well, I think that's a great summary for the whole episode and a great place to stop, although we're very sad. But hopefully this won't be the last time we hang out.
Yeah, maybe we do a recurring segment or we can do something.
I feel like this was the quietest I've been because I was just soaking up. You really spoke. So easy to pull all the pieces together when I hear you talk. And it's really inspiring to hear those little seedlings that have been consistent throughout your life. And I hope that this makes it feel more attainable to people who have kind of been thinking, what are those common threads in my work? I feel like I jump around because I know a lot of creatives feel like they just have so many ideas and they feel so scatterbrained. And I think hearing you put all your pieces together is really quite lovely. So thank you for sharing that with us.
You're welcome. I guess I could leave people with one little nugget. On that note, I know we need to jump off, but anytime I'm stuck, like overthinking to the point of indecision or not doing anything, like something is better than nothing. So if you are just paralyzed by like, I don't know which of these interests to pursue, just take your best guess, do it for a while, and you can always readjust. Like my mom always used to have this rule when we were kids. Well, you know, like kids will see like a green vegetable and be like, I don't like it. I don't want to eat it. And she would always say, like, you can't say you don't like it until you've tried it. And I think that just trying something will lead you closer to an answer than sitting there like on the computer trying to find, like anytime I'm Googling, should you do this? Or like how to do this? And I'm looking to strangers on the internet for like a roadmap, I have to take a step back and be like, let me just try it, figure it out.
Yeah, that's great. I have kids and my sister and I have two different ways of saying that. We have the 3-bite rule, which I could apply to life.
Wait, that's so good. That's actually what
Yeah.
my culinary school instructor, when he would grade like our work, he said he always takes 3 bites to get a sense of how it really tastes.
Unless it's cookie dough, then you have to take 30 bites.
Yes.
Or all of it.
Okay.
And then the other one, my sister calls it a no thank you bite. So you try it and then you can say no thank you.
Yes.
But you don't know until you take the bite and then you can say no thank you.
So
amazing.
Cute.
It is cute. Anyway, do a quick plug on where's the best place for people to follow along with your work and get in touch with you if they want to reach out.
The best place to find me, I'm Hom Sweet Hom, basically everywhere on the internet. It's like Home Sweet Home without the E's in home. I got lucky with my last name. So HOM Sweet HOM is where you can find me.
Love it. Thank you so much.
Can't
wait to do this again. And I can't wait to see what you make next.
Thank you.
Yeah,
this was fun.
We're on for the journey. And if it's going to be more baguettes, we'll save up.
Part of me was like, should I just like throw it up on my website and like see if there's any takers?
Yes, $5,000.
$5,000.
Yep.
Yeah.
Ooh. People will buy it.
8 weeks of time. That's not even worth it.
Yeah, that's true. $10,000.
Oh gosh. Hey,
okay.
You never know.
We'll look for it. All right. Thanks for coming on. We'll catch you later. All good things.